welcome back. Today we're going to start tackling this tailgate. We're going to start with the tailgate because it's pretty minorly damaged. It's got some very small dings. That way we can kind of baby step into doing body work a little bit. Talk you through some of the process. That way, you know, if you start with a big dent, it can get intimidating real fast. We're not really going to, we're going to try to ease into that stuff. Real quick rundown what we're going to use on this. Again, we got the decal to take off, and we got this really, you know, you can see there's a lot of peel and paint. We're going to address that, and we're going to start with the decal removal. Again, the same process as the Z71 stickers and all the others that you're going to run across. Be a heat gun, eraser wheel, something, you know, maybe some lacquer thinner to clean off the residue when you're done. We're going to need a Scotch-Brite for surface prep. We're going to use a grinder for grinding out our dents. That's the only thing we're going to grind on, guys, just the dents. Basically, if you're not putting filler in it, you don't want a grinder. And when I say grinder doing body work, this is what you want. We're using a flap wheel on this. It's a 3M grinder disc on here. And guys, we're going to try to put as many links in the descriptions for this stuff as we possibly can. But again, that's the grinder you're wanting. This has no place in body work. You will never use a grinder like this or a disc like this doing body work. You know, maybe some work on a frame, grinding some welds, you know, doing that stuff maybe sure, but not doing body work. The other thing we're going to need is a DA, just a, you know, doesn't have to be anything special. You can get a DA from anywhere from $40 all the way up to $400. If you're trying to make a living with it, I recommend going to a better brand because of vibration. It's going to be easier on your body. It's not so much that it's a better tool. You know, a lot of them do last longer, but if you're just doing, you know, a quick project in your garage, less than 10 years isn't going to make that much difference to you. And other than that, just some sandpaper. We'll talk about grits and things as we go, you know, what we want to use and how we want to use it, different things like that. But for right now, this is pretty much, you know, the basics of doing most of your minor body work. You get into big dents where you actually pull, then we'll add in some of that equipment. We got some of that to do on this project. So we'll talk about that kind of as the need arises for those things. But for right now, this is all we really need. You know, a basic minor repair on a panel. This will cover you guys. And then once we get everything body worked, and we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna have to take off all this bad paint. We'll do that, and then once we get to the next step, then we'll talk more about our products as far as primers and, you know, paints and things like that go. We'll get more into that as we move down the process. But for right now, this is all we're going to really need, guys. And of course some solvents. You know, we're going to need wax and grease remover. You're going to need lacquer thinner for cleaning different things. We're also going to use just some standard run-of-the-mill all-purpose cleaner. You know, Castrol Super Clean is a good one. Purple Power, Simple Green, anything like that is going to be good for. We're going to have a lot of just dirt and stuff inside mainly on this project, but those are all cleaners that will come in handy. And there's stuff you can use around the house. You know, you may have some around the house already. So, you know, for right now, we're just going to start. We're going to kind of clean up our workspace here and get ready. And the first thing probably will be, since we've already taken the tailgate apart the other day, the first thing is going to be getting the decal stuff off of it. So we'll start there and keep moving forward. Okay, decals again, guys. We're going to have the same exact process as what we did the other day. It's going to be just the eraser wheel and the heat gun. These will probably be more of a bear because this decal is not in as good a shape, and it's, you know, it's just not probably going to come off as well. For one, it's a much bigger decal, so as you're working across it, it's going to want to shred more likely, things like that. But, you know, again, the small ones, we're just going to eraser wheel, and they're going to go away just that fast, guys. Gone. Okay, so now on to the big one again. So what we're going to want to do again, guys, run your heat gun and It's going to take a little while to get enough heat built into this panel to get this apart. So we're just going to work through here and speed this up probably a little bit and get this out of our way so we can start making a little dust. Okay, all things considered, that come off really, really nice, guys. It come off in pretty big pieces, which really surprises me. Doesn't usually happen that way. And one thing you notice, guys, as I'm doing that, I'm keeping that heat gun out in front of where I'm working, because if you get that heat up on that decal, it's just going to blow it apart, and you're really going to start fighting it, tearing and everything else. So if you want to get the whole thing warm and then work out ahead of it as you're pulling with the heat. That way your decal stays in one piece more. If you end up with 1,000 little pieces, you're going to really hate life, and you're just not going to have a good time. So next thing we need to do is, you can kind of see me looking over this thing. What we're looking for now is where the dents are, because what I like to do is just take a Sharpie, and when I see a dent, and they're going to be hard for you guys to see, it's hard for me to pick them up in the camera, but I will mark them out here and we'll go from there. But I can see a pretty good one there, and there's a couple here, one there, one there. And again, with the marker, guys, I'm just giving myself a reference point, because I'm going to have to body work these areas, and I'm just looking to know where I'm headed with my grinder, and we're going to move forward from there. Then that one right there is probably the worst one in the whole gate, and it's not even real bad. So we're in pretty good shape probably as far as body work on this panel is going to be concerned. And realistically, if I see this panel moving to my stall in the shop, the biggest thing I'm worried about is getting all this paint off of here, because the product has clearly failed, and that's just, again, very common with all the whites of this era. All your lighter colors were really bad. And again, guys, this pickup's over 20 years old. So this paint, being factory paint, is over 20 years old. It's lived a fairly hard life, obviously, from the condition, but it's not seeing the shelter. It's out in every storm. It's out in the sun every single day, sitting out in the middle of a field, just baking. So we're not really too worried about that. We're gonna clean it off, and when it's failed to this point, it usually comes off pretty easily, but we'll just deal with that, and that's just part of life and part of dealing with one of these pickups. So we're gonna move on to the grinding stage now, and we're gonna, again, guys, the only things we're gonna grind is the dents. You'll see how big my areas are, and with these dents, they're not so deep that we need to put a pin in them and pull them up or anything. They're going to be pretty minor. There's not going to take much filler. You're not going to end up with a golf ball's worth of filler in this whole tailgate, even with half a dozen little dents here. So next thing we're going to do is get into grinding those and show you kind of how to do it and what to expect when it happens. And it's a big leap if it's not something that you do regularly, to put a grinder on your tailgate, but trust me, guys, it's not going to be bad. That's why we're using a grinder like this. If you take your big 4.5 inch regular grinder like I showed you before, you're going to have a really bad time, because you're going to grind right through this. This is just sheet metal, and it's going to make a mess. But with what we're doing, it's pretty soft, pretty easy going, so nothing too much to be worried about. Here's the grinder again, and guys, we're just using a 60 grit disc is all this is. Flat disc. It's a 60 grit, so it's really not gonna be super aggressive. We're just looking to get the paint out of the dent, and we're looking to get the metal prepared to hold onto our filler. That's going to be the biggest thing we're trying to accomplish right now, is just giving that filler something to bite into. That way, because with body work, your failure point is your preparation, and that's going to be the weak link. So we're going to prepare it right, and we're going to have a good product when we're done. It's going to last us a long time. Okay, guys, we got some small dents here. Again, these are going to be really hard to show you on the camera, so I'll just talk you through. There's something's contacted this right here, and then this is just going to be a couple little dings, and then one over here. Now, with a small dent like this, when you run across it with your grinder, the heat that grinder makes is actually going to raise that dent. And so if you grind it and get it super hot, it's going to want to warp, basically. But just the right amount of heat is going to actually restore a lot of the straightness of that panel, because it's just going to shrink back to where it should be, because your metal is actually stretched. In a dent, your metal is actually stretched a little bit. That's just the nature of the beast. But we're going to grind that out and prepare it for filler and go from there. So now, guys, we got our spots ground out, and they raised up real nice. Like I said, they were minor dings to start with, so that little bit of heat from that grinder really pops them right back up. So now, once we've got that ground, the next step is we need to feather edge our paint away from that. And with this one, we're actually going to end up probably running a DA and stripping this whole gate down to bare metal. So feather edging's not as big a deal, because you're not really stopping. If you're in you've got one dent and a otherwise nice tailgate, you can just feather edge your area. And we're going to start with 80 grit so that we can get that out of there pretty quickly. And then we're going to go to 180. And if you're working on priming just an area, you're going to want to end up in the 320, 400 range as far as grit goes, before you're putting anything primer-wise over it, because your primer is going to fill a 180 grit scratch pretty easily. It won't fill an 80 grit. You'll have sand. It may look fine, but eventually, guys, it will come back. 320 to 400. The biggest difference there is we're dealing with a solid white tailgate. If we were putting a fine metallic on it, that metallic is going to be smaller than your sand scratch. So if you've got a tail in it from your DA with 320 and you got a scratch out there, your metallic's going to stand in that scratch really weird, and you're going to be able to see it, and it's going to drive you crazy forever that you just didn't take that one final step. So a metallic color, you're going to want to finish out a lot finer than just a white, especially, is going to be hard to see any sand scratches, and your products are most likely going to fill it anyways. But just to be sure, if you're going to, say you're painting a silver or a lighter blue metallic or something like that, a lighter red metallic, anything with metallic in it, you want to go ahead and get to a finer finish, a finer grit before you're done, because like I said, you leave a sand scratch in it, that metallic will show it up. On this solid white, you're not going to see that reflection off that piece of metallic, so it's a lot different ball game. But for this, just going to be solid white, so we're going to go 80, 180, and 320 is going to be pretty much the three grits we're going to use throughout this project. Whether all the way, we're going to finish for paint in about a 320 grit, maybe 400 depending on how things are going. But for right now, we're going to go with some 80 grit and feather edge these back and get them ready for filler. Okay guys, just that fast. That dent's ready to have a little filler put on it. And you can see that's what you're looking for. We just don't want the harsh edge of that grinder mark right there. You want it to be a nice smooth transition into the existing finish. Again, I'm just showing you this, but we're going to end up peeling all the white off of this. You can also, I don't know if you can tell in the video, but when I get down here into what was under the decal, it sands much harder because it's been protected. That's still healthy paint under where that decal was. The rest of this is dead and peeling, and it's just not in good shape, but you can tell how much difference that decal protection made. One thing I want to do real quick before we get too carried away with the outside is, I should have thought about it before, but not usually how these are done in a production shop, so we're going to do a little different. We're going to do the inside of the tailgate on this project. We're going to have this will all be white, fresh white again, and then we'll have a spray-in bed liner that will cover most of this. So given the nature of what's in here, a bunch of dirt and grime and some grease and oil and stuff, we're going to clean that up because we're using a water-based product in here. I don't really want that on all the bare metal on the outside. So before I get to a bunch of bare metal out there, I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. Most of what I'm going to do for this is, again, just an all-purpose cleaner. And I just diluted it in a spray bottle. I'm going to need some clean rags to dry up. And then I'm going to use red Scotch-Brite. Again, the Scotch-Brite, red is going to be fine for a white, a solid color like that. You get into again, a metallic, you're going to want to go down to at least a gray Scotch-Brite for any final prep work, because this is a much harsher pad than, say, a gray, and the difference is going to be the metallic standing in those scratches and scuff marks. You don't want too aggressive of a scratch because it will show up in your metallic. And if you're dealing with, we don't really have much here, no metallic obviously, but even a solid color, if you're dealing with a plastic part, you want to stay away from the red anyways. It's just too aggressive for plastic and spraying metallics over and things like that. So even if we were working on a white, say we're working on a newer Malibu, let's say, just for random, no matter what, you don't really want a red Scotch-Brite because it's just too much scratch for a plastic substrate. So we're going to get in here and clean this up. There will be some sandpaper and work along the edges here, clean up some of this stuff. But most of the work here is going to be with this, and we're going to spray it on. And we're going to use this to scrub it, and that will leave an abrasion when we're done. And we should be good to go and ready for, that will actually be pretty well ready for primer and paint after that, because we're not looking for near the level of finish as we're looking for on the outside of the pickup. So that's pretty much the simple steps there. See guys, we got all the white paint off the tailgate, so we shouldn't have any problems with that stuff contaminating anything. It took a lot of time in our body lines here and around our tailgate handle. Get in there by hand with some sandpaper. So far we've only gone over it with 80 grit. We're going to finish it with 180 before we move towards primer. But right now, since we got that done and we blew it all off real good, took a nice strong blowgun and blew all the dust off, Now we're going to do some filler. And this is a new product for me, but we'll see how it works out. But you're going to have a filler and a hardener. You're going to need a spreader to move it around with. And I'm just going to use cardboard to mix it on. There's a lot of guys that tell you don't do that. It's not something I make a practice of. But for something like this, it's not going to hurt anything. It's just easier to have a regular mud board if you're doing it regularly. But you're going to get just as good a product off of that as you are anywhere. One thing you want to make sure to mix your hardener, you just squeeze it through your fingers, because when you first start out, it's going to be, the first stuff's going to be real watery, and then it's going to be thick in the end, and you don't want that. You want it as even as possible. And when you're mixing, basically as far as ratio goes, what you're going to end up wanting is when the can is empty, the tube is empty. So, you know, I realize that's really hard to judge, but I'll kind of show you guys how much of each I use, and it will change. You know, if you got really cold weather, you're gonna need a little more hardener. You're gonna need it to kick a little faster. One thing to be careful of though, guys, especially like with a white, a metallic will probably hide it. You can get too much hardener, and what will happen with, say we put too much hardener in it and we got this dent here, it will come back and it will be, you will be able to see through that white paint, and this is going to be red. So what you're going to see is basically a pink spot in your tailgate where that mud is that has too much hardener, because they call it peroxide staining, because this is a peroxide product. So right on the thing, and that peroxide will basically bleed back through your finish, and you'll always see it. And if that happens, the only thing I've ever been told, you can either take the mud out, which is too much work, and it's foolish, but a coarse metallic will actually hold that down. So if you get a spot and it bleeds back through your white paint, and you go, oh man, that looks like hell, you can get, like say a silver, a coarse metallic silver, re-prep your gate, spray that over your area, and come back. That's a cheat, and it's not something that you should ever have to do, but that's the one thing I've been told that will actually hold it back, is that coarse metallic will hold that peroxide underneath it. Just don't mix it wrong. That's the best thing I can tell you. And I normally wouldn't put it on the gate, on the panel I'm working on, but it's hard for me to do it anywhere else and actually show you guys. So we're gonna, and again, we're only gonna mix what we need, because anything we mix that we don't put on here is thrown away, because once it's hardened, it's hardened. I did come across a few little dings in the top rail here too, so I'm gonna go ahead and fill them while we're doing this. And we're just gonna take your spreader and just basically scoop out what you need, guys. And again, we're not looking for a lot, and we don't really want to waste the product, so we're going to try to just mix what we need. That should be plenty for what we're trying to accomplish. Put the lid back on this so we don't get it full of crap. Flip this out of the way. And again, guys, wear your gloves. This stuff, it's not good for your skin. You need to be wearing a respirator when you're doing this kind of work. You don't really see me wearing one much because I'm trying to communicate at the same time, but you definitely need a good respirator. Protect yourself. And when we're doing hardener, we're just going to put a ribbon over it like that. That's going to be plenty for that amount of filler, I believe. Then you're going to want to mix it. You don't want to really stir it. You just want to keep dragging it through itself until it's thoroughly mixed, because if you start doing a bunch of this, you're just working air into that filler, and that air is going to be a pinhole when you're done. And if you don't address the pinholes, then you're really going to be unhappy because you got a bunch of holes in your paint job. Okay, that's pretty thoroughly mixed. Now, don't put too much more than what you need. Anything you put on extra, you got to take off. So we're just going to work right over our spots here. And we're going to make nice smooth passes. And again, we're not putting any more on there than what we actually really need. And it does need to be bigger than your dent, because your dent is bigger than you realize. You know, it may be just a little spot here, but that whole metal area is recessed just enough that you're going to want some filler on that. And so, but at the same time, guys, don't just, you know, really skimp, because you don't want to have to sand it off. But don't just pile it on there 1/4 inch deep thinking, oh, well, that saves me a lot of time. No, it doesn't. It costs you time, it costs you material, which in the end costs you money. Okay, and then we got a couple up here to hit real fast. And you do have just a very limited time to get this stuff on, guys, because it's gonna start to dry really soon here. And when that happens, you're done spreading, because you don't want to spread a bunch of chunky filler on your panel, because then that's just that much more mess to deal with in a little bit there when it's time to sand. So we'll let that set up and get to sanding.